Good afternoon, Priya. My name is Liam Broadby and I'm a licensed conveyancer. How are you going today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks. And thanks so much for meeting me here today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. So we're obviously here in relation to your purchase with your partner, Matthew Kapoor. And I'll be taking your instructions here today in relation to your purchase matter. So I hope you don't mind me taking notes throughout our meeting.
No worries.
Great. So just before we begin, I'd just like to let you know that I will be taking your instructions and asking any questions about the contract and the circumstances leading up to the contract actually being signed.
Yep.
And I'll also just throughout our meeting provide some preliminary advice based on the information that you provide me with.
Yep.
I understand following our officer's due diligence that issues have been identified in regards to the zoning of the property, which has in fact affected your developments that you were going to make. So I'll also discuss those with you today. However, if any complex legal issues do arise throughout our meeting, particularly around the enforceability of the contract or your options to withdraw from that contract, I'll just need to refer those to a lawyer for independent legal advice so they can provide that final confirmation. So before we proceed, are you happy to proceed on that basis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, no worries. So just to begin, are you able to explain to me in your own words what's happened and what your main concerns are in relation to the purchase that you're currently in?
Yeah, absolutely. So Matthew and I signed an unconditional contract to purchase the property at 44 Seaview.
Yep.
Before signing, we were told by the developer's representative that the lot could accommodate a 3-story home.
Yep.
With a rooftop terrace. And that was a big reason why we wanted it.
Yeah, okay, and thanks for letting me know that. And was that something that appeared in a brochure or marketing material before entering into the contract?
Yes, it was mentioned in the brochure.
Yeah, okay, so just so I understand correctly, your main concern is that you and Matthew entered into the contract relying on what was told about the development potential of the property, such as in that brochure, and you're now concerned about that the intended design that you were originally wanting can no longer lawfully be built. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Perfect. So you're able just to explain to me a little more about what you and Matthew were intending to build?
Yeah, so exactly that. We intended to build a 3-story home with a rooftop terrace, and that was the whole reason we were interested in the property in the first place.
Rooftop terrace, yeah, of course. And did you and Matthew rely on that information when deciding to go ahead with the purchase? I assume so.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So obviously that I understand that'd be quite a stressful time for you guys.
Yeah.
So thanks for alerting me of that. So what outcome are you after from achieving from this issue? Are you wanting advice about whether you can withdraw from the contract or whether the contract can be changed in a way, or what remedies you're wanting? What are you actually wanting from today's meeting?
So we just want to know whether we can withdraw from the purchase, really.
Yeah, okay, so it's really that's the deal breaker. You wanted that 3-story home, but because it can't be built, you no longer want the property?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And do you have a copy of that signed contract in the brochure or any written material referring to the 3-story design that you were wanting?
Yes, I can provide that to you.
Great. So based on what you've explained to me, there appears to be a standard form RUIT contract of sale, which both yourself and Matthew have signed as purchasers, and the vendors have signed, being Property Developers Propriety Limited.
Yeah.
So its purpose of the contract is to record the agreement for the purchase of the property.
Yeah.
And the contract itself will include terms such as the deposit and the purchase price, and any contractual terms such as a finance clause. So is that consistent with your understanding of what you've entered into?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. So I'll just briefly explain some elements of a legally binding contract, just so you're aware of some elements that does make up a contract that you've entered into.
Yeah.
So a contract generally requires an offer, where one party proposes terms, acceptance, where the other party accepts those proposed terms. A contract must have consideration, meaning something of value is exchanged. So in this circumstance, it is the purchase price in exchange for the property. It also must have an intention to create legal relations. So both parties must intend for the contract to be legally bound. Capacity, meaning that the parties must be legally capable of entering into the agreement.
Yeah.
And lastly, legality, meaning that the agreement must be lawful, it can't be illegal in any way.
Yeah.
So in saying all that, in your matter, that written contract appears to satisfy those usual elements of a contract of sale to be considered legally binding.
Yeah.
So in face value, it does appear that it is a legally binding contract.
Yeah.
However, even where those elements are present, enforceability may still be questioned if there are any misleading representations made before the contract was signed, which it may be in this case.
Okay, yeah.
So is that all making sense so far?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So the main issue here is not whether the contract was validly formed at the outset, because it does appear it was, because it did satisfy those usual elements of a contract.
Yeah.
The real issue is whether the contract would still likely be upheld if it can be established that you and Matthew were induced to enter into the agreement based on the misrepresentation by the property developer, because you were told that you could accommodate a 3-story home with a rooftop terrace, which is not permitted under the current zoning controls, which our recent due diligence found out. So a court would likely look at what was said before signing the contract and whether that representation was in fact made. It also whether it was false or misleading, those representation, and whether you and Matthew relied on it. And also what reliance was significant in your decision to enter the contract, so whether that was enough of a decision for you to enter into the contract. So if it was deemed that maybe that wasn't your do or die, then maybe no. But however, if it appears that that was the main reason and main objective for you going into the contract, then it may be considered, the court may consider that as you having a right to exit the contract. So if those matters can be established, there may be grounds to challenge the contract, or potentially to seek another remedy. So at this stage, I can't give final advice on the enforceability of the contract, because that will depend on the contract itself once we've reviewed that in its entirety. Also the brochure explaining the requirements and that you may be able to build a 3-story apartment on the property. The planning information, and also extensive legal review by a senior lawyer.
Okay. And so the fact that the contract is unconditional, that doesn't necessarily mean we have no options?
Yes, that's correct. An unconditional contract is significant because you are usually, you're bound by the terms to proceed. However, it doesn't automatically prevent issues being raised if there were misleading representations made before signing, which again, in this case, it seems there was.
Okay.
So in your situation, the important issue is the circumstances in which the contract was entered into. So you've explained to me that before signing, a representative for the vendor told you and Matthew that the property could accommodate a 3-story home with a rooftop terrace. And that this was also represented in the brochure, that's correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so you've also explained that the representation was a key reason why you both entered into the contract, as you want to build your dream home. So the legal concern is that if that representation was inaccurate and the zoning rules do not allow you to build that intended design, then the contract may have been entered into on the basis of incorrect or misrepresentation from the vendor. So this raises questions about whether there was a misrepresentation by the vendor, whether you and Matthew were induced to enter into the contract by that representation, whether the contract should be enforced in the usual way, and whether there are any rights to withdraw or potentially terminate the agreement, and potentially other remedies that may be available as well.
Okay, and does that mean the developer may have done something wrong?
Yeah, so potentially yes, but that does depend on the exact wording of the representation used, as well as the exact wording in the brochure, and also the zoning controls and whether that statement was relied on when you and Matthew actually entered into the contract.
Okay, and what if the representation was mainly verbal?
So that can still be relevant, but it is harder to prove when it is just verbal, which is why the brochure, any emails or notes or any supporting material suggesting that misrepresentation occurred will be important in proving that.
Okay,
Yes, is that all making sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So just moving on to some remedies. So there are a few potential remedies or options that may be available. However, just depending on how strong the evidence is. So first, there may be grounds to seek to withdraw from the contract or challenge it if it can be established that you and Matthew were induced into entering into the misleading representation. Secondly, there may be scope to negotiate with the vendor for a commercial resolution, such as simply just terminating the agreement as a whole. And thirdly, depending on the legal basis available, there may be claim for other remedies if matters cannot be resolved informally between yourselves and the vendor.
Okay.
So the advantages of acting early in seeking a remedy is that you may be able to reduce further loss, and you might get an outcome a long time before settlement. However, the disadvantages are that the matter may be disputed, which results really in just a time-consuming and costly processes when lawyers get involved as well.
Okay. And so we can't just cancel the contract now?
No, not automatically. It'd be great if we could, but it just will depend on the strength of the evidence that we hold, and the wording of the contract and the brochure and just legal advice given. So it depends on the legal advice given after review of your entire matter as a whole.
Okay, and in the meantime, can settlement be stopped while it's being looked at?
Possibly, it could potentially be delayed, and that will depend on the timing and also the evidence available. And also, I just can't stress this enough, just obtaining that independent legal advice so they can review your matter as a whole and they'll be able to advise you on the best legal steps.
Okay, yeah.
So there are several issues that I would need to refer for further advice before final confirmation can be provided in relation to your next steps. So these include whether the statements made before signing does amount to misrepresentation. Also whether the brochure and verbal advice were misleading to assist in your argument in relation to misrepresentation.
Yeah.
Also whether you and Matthew relied on those statements heavily when entering into the agreement. When the contract may be rescinded or otherwise challenged, and also what urgent steps should be taken before settlement can take place, or simply before settlement is brought to an end and the contract's terminated. So because the matter may involve potential misrepresentation and withdrawal from the unconditional contract, I would strongly recommend that the matter is reviewed by a senior lawyer and that independent legal advice is obtained as soon as possible before any final position is taken.
Okay, yep.
And is that making sense? You're happy with that recommendation as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So just so I can confirm my understanding of your instructions here today, so I understand that you and Matthew would like advice about whether the unconditional contract for the purchase of the property can be challenged or brought to an end because of the representations made to you. And I understand that this is due to the developments that you were wanting to make on the land and whether you remain bound by the purchase contract. And I also understand that you're wanting to understand the most recommended next steps to protect your interests. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. So thank you. So for explaining your situation, as I understand it would be quite alarming when you want to build your dream home and now you're locked into an unconditional contract. So thank you for that. So the next steps for us is to review the signed contract, also the brochure, any written or recorded representations that were made to you before entering into the contract.
Yeah.
We'll also review any planning information relating to the neighbourhood residential zone. And after that, the matter should be referred to a senior lawyer for that final advice about your rights and obligations under the contract, and also just so they can let you know of the most recommended next steps moving forward.
Yeah.
So again, thanks for meeting me here today. Do you have any questions before we finish up?
No, that's all good for now. Thank you for having me.
Great, no worries at all. If you do have any questions at all, feel free to give me a call. However, in the meantime, I will provide a preliminary advice letter for you, which will just explain some preliminary advice and what we need from you at this stage.
Yeah.
And then once we've got the contract and all supporting evidence about potential misrepresentation, we'll then refer you on to an independent lawyer for that independent legal advice.
Perfect.
So they can let you know of your next steps.
Wonderful. Thank you.
No problem at all.